Well, I think this is working. This old computer is not liking a lot of this stuff at the moment. I'm on Twitter, Kick, Facebook, YouTube. I think I've got myself covered on a lot of social media things. Welcome and hello. My name is Joanne. I'm a law student from Australia, and I want to welcome you here. I just need to do something on the left here because I've got the two screens going, so I'm sorry. Just want to get some stuff done. I need to just also put in my little title slide as well. This new setup on Restream doesn't allow me to do a countdown at the moment. So, and this is bizarre. So this is called Should Ned Kelly's History Be Preserved? Now, there is a bit of a battle at the moment between the Kelly family, the descendants of Ned Kelly, and the powers that be regarding the history that occurred at Glenrowan. For those of you who aren't sure who Ned Kelly is, well, Ned Kelly was a bush ranger from the 1800s. He was involved, he evaded police. I mean, he's one of those people that would commit crimes and would evade police. Ended up being Glenrowan where there was a big shootout, and he eventually was shot. He was famous for his armor. He had a suit of armor that was worn that protected him. And so Glenrowan is known as the birth of the Ned Kelly country. So the Kelly family had put there are some developments, redevelopments that are happening in around Glenrowan at the moment. And the Kelly family put in a request to have those developments halted as preservation of history. And let's just see what the court said. So this occurred on, so this is from The Age. And we're going to hear from a grandniece of Ned Kelly, a grandniece. So this is what's happened. And so I want to put it to the Facebook family to see what you think, because and what is cultural significance. So Ned Kelly's great grandniece has lost the Supreme Court bid to halt development at the site of the outlaw's last stand at Glenrowan, after arguing she and her family should be afforded cultural protections under Victorian human rights laws. Joanne Griffith, a fourth-generation descendant of Ned and Dan Kelly's parents, Joan and Ellen Kelly, said the decision handed down last week was the latest setback in clashes with Victoria's legal system that has punished the family for hundreds of years. So she's essentially saying that the Kelly family and the law don't get on. They don't get on. So this is a picture of her at the State Library Victoria, where they actually have Ned Kelly's armour on display, I believe. We were hunted back then, and we're still hunted now, she told this masthead. So, and now she says, if we were Indigenous, this would not be happening. So now she's brought race into it. The action was launched by a not-for-profit Griffith founded in 2015 called the Ned Kelly Centre. Established, she said, to protect the cultural heritage of the outlaw and to tell the story of the Kelly family on their own terms. Griffith had attempted to halt construction of two buildings near the site where Kelly was captured and arrested in Glenrowan in the state's northeast, one a tower and the other a bridge upgrade. The developments, she claimed, in legal documents were inconsistent with, infringe upon, and or contradict the human rights of the descendants. The descendants have the right pursuant to the Charter of Human Rights as a distinctive cultural group to practice and enjoy their culture, including their intangible cultural heritage, including traditional use and enjoyment of the heritage place. She said she was extremely disappointed and mortified by the decision. I'm sure we're being discriminated against, she said. The centre's lawyer, Alan Flint, argued that the Kelly descendants should be recognised as a distinct cultural group and said their legal entitlement to bring the case was akin to Aboriginal groups and veterans who were afforded protections under Victoria's Charter of Human Rights. They view themselves as cultural custodians, Flint told Justice Melinda Richards on July 6. The structures threatened to entrench the gross disrespect to descendants that would take place if that tower is completed, Flint argued, adding that the family had undergone distress and persecution as a result of the development. I know that the cultural rights have been disputed, but if you look at the rights in the Human Rights Act, what constitutes a cultural group? The cultural group is part of a group that has a common racial, religious, or cultural background, and they see themselves as part of a culture. Action was taken against the City of Wangaratta, Heritage Victoria, and the Australian Rail Track Corporation. Hello, Vidandra. So this is Ned Kelly. This was the day before he was hung. So he was hung in the old Melbourne jail, or Pentridge, where I visited just recently. So, my pleasure, Vidandra. So Glen Rowan, as I said, is very synonymous with Ned Kelly. The town of Glen Rowan is where Kelly was finally captured by police in June 1880. The other members of the Kelly gang died during an incident later called the Siege of Glen Rowan. Joe Byrne was shot by police, and Dan Kelly and Steve Hart died inside Anne Jones's Glen Rowan Inn, where the gang had been waiting with hostages. The police set fire to the inn while they were still inside, and it burnt to the ground. 3 civilians also died, including the publican's 13-year-old son. Barnaby Chessel, acting for the ARTC, argued against the proposition that Kelly's descendants should be considered a distinct cultural group and entitled to separate human rights. So this is part of the transcript. Flint appears for the Kelly family descendants. It says, so Flint, the lawyer, says, it is significant to take note that the treatment of the remains or relatives or descendants in this matter is very pertinent, because the treatment of the remains on the day of the siege, or the days of the siege at Glen Rowan, where they were hideously disfigured by being partially burnt, and the burning of the inn, and then recovered by the family against opposition by police. And then the butchery, if I can put it that way, of Ned Kelly after his hanging was quite extreme. His head was sawn off, the flesh was boiled off, it was used as a paperweight repeatedly until it was lost. And just on a side note, they still have a cast of Ned Kelly's skull that you can actually see. Justice Richard says, Mr. Flint, as heinous as those matters are, they're not matters that can be laid at the door of either the Australian Rail Track Corporation or the rural city of Wangaratta. We submit, in addition, that descendants of Ned Kelly don't constitute a cultural group to which the protections afforded under the Human Rights Charter would apply, he argued. Flint also accused the council and the ARTC of fraud and said the permits issued for construction were invalid on that basis. Justice Richards dismissed the case, rejecting Griffith's application for an injunction and finding that the Human Rights Charter did not apply because the Ned Kelly Centre is a corporation. She said that Griffith's assertion that she's part of a distinct cultural group are at present no more than assertions. Miss Griffiths is certainly passionate and determined in her efforts to protect and preserve Kelly-related cultural heritage, but affidavits told me nothing about any cultural practices she shares with the other descendants of the Kelly family Richards found. This is what they're looking at building, apparently. Part of the proposed development includes a viewing tower, a siege site experience enhanced with virtual and augmented realities and landscaping works around Lyon Park. Presently, there is a plaque commemorating the site and a few tourist attractions, including the Kate's Cottage Museum and an anatomic display called Kellyland. I think it's great, said Doug Stoneman, owner of Kate's Cottage. Stoneman said he just updated a Kelly mural in town and the display will draw new tourists to town. We don't know what's going there because it's not open yet, but from what I've been told, it's going to be a visual touchscreen which lights up the actual area based on what it looked like back in the day, which sounds awesome. City of Rangaroa Chief Executive Brendan McGrath wouldn't comment on the case, but said the community is eagerly awaiting the centre. During the hearing, Justice Richards encouraged Flint to confine his arguments to the claims at hand and avoid giving her a history lesson about the past crimes inflicted on the Kelly family. You have quite a significant task to persuade me that I should grant relief in any form at the moment. You should really focus on doing that rather than giving me a history lesson. The ARTC spokesman said that Ned Kelly Centre seemed intent on pursuing the matter further, despite the rejection by the court, and it would continue to legally defend the development should the need arise. Griffith said she was absolutely mortified by the outcome and that she intended to appeal the decision. It is our history and our heritage, and I think if anyone could present in a way that it should be done, it should be us, but we seem to have no voice. I'm sure I'm being discriminated against. The Kellys, let's just say, haven't had a great time with the courts over the last 100 and something years. Have you noticed? Heritage Victoria declined to comment. So that is that. Now, the conversation, which is an independent paper, actually goes one step further, which is really interesting. So they've actually taken it to another step further. They were really ruthless back then, weren't they? But I mean, he did shoot and kill police officers as well. So if you go to Glenrowan, you'll find that there's this giant lifelike Ned Kelly figure above and it's tall. So there's the roof and it goes above the roof. Lots of people will just stop at that site and get their photos taken. So this is from the conversation. So she says the Victorian Supreme Court, and it's 6 meters tall. A 6 meter tall Ned Kelly stands on the main street of Glenrowan. It does. It's huge. In fact, you usually have to cross the other side of the street to get yourself and Ned Kelly in. But the Victorian Supreme Court determined the descendants of Ned Kelly's family are not a distinctive cultural group with the rights of protections of their intangible cultural heritage. The Kelly clan's bid for recognition was provoked by proposed tourist development at Glenrowan, the site of the Outlaws' last stand in 1880. The new centre will look at the story of the Kelly gang in the context of Glenrowan's broader history. Kelly's grandniece, Joanne Griffith, argues the new structure and landscaping will disrespect her family's human rights as cultural custodians. So, as we just read, Justice Melinda Richards found Griffith and the family could not prove practices that would distinguish them as a cultural group. The redevelopment continues as proposed. Griffith claimed the court's decision is a continuation of the persecution meted out to the Kelly family. And then she made this claim: if we were Indigenous, this wouldn't be happening. So then the conversation goes on to say the case raises fascinating questions about the definition and evidence of white cultural heritage in Australia and the way we treat sites of colonial history. Now, I'll just also say that there is the Melbourne City Council is looking at Captain Cook's cottage and whether it's still appropriate to have it open because it's white colonial history. I am a person that believes that our history is our history, good or bad, and it's our history that makes us the people that we are today. And so we need to look at our history and look at what worked and what hasn't worked, take and ensure they last, and look at the things that haven't worked and make sure that we don't do them again. For example, war. So Glenrowan is tucked inside the southeastern boundary of the Yorta Yorta country, where the Ovens River floodplains meet the rising foothills of the Victorian Alps. In 1998, the Yorta Yorta were denied native title because, according to Justice Howard O'Leary, the tide of history has undoubtedly washed away any traditional rights to their lands and waters. The Kelly descendants made no claim to native title, but by invoking their cultural heritage, they tasked themselves with the same burden of proof required of First Nations people in fighting for land rights. The Kelly descendants were not claiming the site as one of public significance. They were claiming familial connections. So this is the Kelly gang. So this is Steve Hart, Dan Kelly, the brother, and Ned Kelly. There is no doubt Ned Kelly's descendants share a unique emotional relationship with Glenrowan. That needs no justification or proof. Many non-Indigenous people, like the writer, feel close connections to certain parts of Australia. Historian James E. Young coined the term collected memory rather than collective memory. A society's memory, he says, might be regarded as an aggregate collection of its members, many often competing memories. Several Australian authors have explored this collected memory. Luke Stegeman's Amnesia Road investigates the entanglement of Stegeman's life and work in the colonial histories of Queensland and Adelaide. Dean Ashenden's Telling Tennant's Story examines how the place of his upbringing embodies the impacts of satellite colonial legislation. Collected memory is also enacted in memorabilia. The statue of politician William Crowther in Niplania/Hobart is being removed, so only the plinth will remain, with signage explaining his contentious history, and in public rituals like Survival Day dawn services. As well as lacking recognition of the Yorta Yorta struggle, the Kelly family's bid overlooks the ongoing critique by historians like Dave Duffy of Ned Kelly's story as a tale of persecution. Anti-Irish racism notwithstanding, Duffy highlights Kelly's ruthless violence, youth of terror in taking hostages, and incoherent politics. So this is the hotel, what it looked like after it was burnt down. So by asking what is distinctive about the Kelly's descendants' right to cultural protections, we are echoing the question posed by Gandhamajara artist Paloa Bella. Tell me what it means to be a white person beyond a notion of racial supremacy. White cultural heritage in Australia is made of many memories and histories that intersect with one another, with settlers of colour and with First Nations people. Cases like these raise interesting questions about how we identify and memorialise shared heritage. If the Kelly family took a more nuanced position, they could have opened a public conversation about how we commemorate colonial history, the nuances of the Irish-back solidarities, and a deeper sense of white allyship to First Nations people's human rights. With its big Ned Bark Hut Museum and its janky animatronic diorama, Glenrowan is currently a prime example of what writer and artist Melanie Paloma defines as satellite Kitish. In Australia, the development of monuments to colonial history continues to be a work in progress. The proposed development is a chance for a more complex presentation of colonial heritage. The Sovereign Hill Living Museum is working to illuminate the culturally diverse stories of Ballarat. The Tasmanian Museum Art Gallery has also sought to face its past by recreating its public program and exhibition spaces around First Nations, particularly the Polawara art and culture. Photographer John Rhodes has spent decades documenting the curious histories of municipal and community treatment of sites of First Nations cultural heritage and colonial violence. An outliner of Myall Creek Massacre Memorial offers a deeply effective model of how such sites of shared cultural heritage can be rebuilt and maintained by white and black communities together. So this is this was erected on 10th of June by a group of Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Australians as an act of reconciliation and acknowledgement of the truth of our shared history. So it was in memory of the Wirawari people who were murdered on the slopes of this ridge in an unprovoked but premeditated act in the late afternoon of 10th of June 1838. Perhaps Glenrowan will come to be understood as one such place. Always Yorta Yorta, for a moment a place of complicated anti-colonial white-on-white rebellion. Later, a carnival of settler kiddish, and eventually maybe a thoughtful site of ongoing history-telling embedded in country. Developments like the one coming to Glenrowan could create tangible answers to the question of what inclusive and informed experience of white cultural heritage might look like. So I said that's a very interesting take on things. So in Ballarat, they have Sovereign Hill, which takes you back to the gold rush era. So they're looking at how they can incorporate some First Nations history into that. As I said, history is really important, good or bad. We need to learn from our history. We need to work out what works and what doesn't work. I'm not really a big believer in erasing history. I think we need to just look and focus on look at the good bits and celebrate the good bits, but look at the bad bits and say, well, we can't have that happen again. And when we talk about white colonial history also, we're talking about a group of people that had no say. They were just put on a ship. So, for example, my children, their ancestors, bought a loaf of bread that had been stolen. She bought bread. She was hungry. She bought a loaf of bread. She didn't know that someone had stolen that bread. So she was stunned for receiving stolen property. She goes to court and they said, you're going to go to Australia. And that's what happened. She was sent to Australia on a boat. And interestingly enough, she was on an all-female boat. And by the time she got to Australia, she was expecting. So one of the first white babies born here was actually my children's ancestors. So, but look, I know it's very controversial, all of this stuff, trying to find, as we understand more of our First Nations history and we try and merge the two histories together and try and respect both histories. It's a very complicated, it's very, very interesting. But as I said, I'm very interested to see what you think. Should Glenrowan be preserved? I think, although from what I can see, from what they're talking about, it sounds like it's going to be really good. But I sort of get the impression that the Kelly family want to have their own narrative. They may not like the narrative of the stories that are being told. That's what I'm thinking anyway. But look, I need to go now. I need to keep moving on and pressing on and doing some other stuff. And so I will catch you all again later. I want to thank you all for watching. If you could hit like and subscribe for me, that would be great. And I will catch you again next time. Bye for now.